So today we're in Birmingham, Alabama at the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument. A special thank you to the National Park Foundation for their collaboration on this project. Tell us where we are and then introduce our guests to us.
Absolutely. We are at the historic Bethel Baptist Church, and we are joined today by two of my favorite people, Dr. Martha Boyer and Reverend Thomas Wilder.
Thank you so much for having us here. I'm feeling right at home. My dad is a pastor, so I feel like I need to start singing out of the hymn book in a little bit. But thank you for having us here as we tell this story to students across the country. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll do the same for you, Reverend Wilder. And why is this an important place?
My name is Martha Boyer, and I'm a retired educator with the Jefferson County Board of Education located here in Birmingham. And I've been working here at Bethel Baptist Church since 2014 after I retired. And I really want to do this because this is a special place. It is here at Bethel Baptist Church where the modern civil rights movement as we know it in Birmingham started. The pastor at that time was Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth, and he is someone that I got to know personally. I actually had an opportunity to invite him to my home and cook dinner for him twice. And I just loved working with him and telling his story. I am so excited to be here, and the opportunity to share this story with people from around the world happens almost every day. There's always someone coming, and we're always ready to tell it.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I have this kindred spirit with you also because I am also a teacher, so I love that. And Reverend Wilder, how did you become a part of this? And then just tell us a little bit about this place.
Okay, this is the place where the modern civil rights movement started. As Dr. Boyer said, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth was the person who sort of organized everything, and he was the impetus behind a lot of the things that went on here prior to 1963. I came here because I started as pastor in 1988 and did not know, honestly, a lot about the church until I met Reverend Shuttlesworth. I kept hearing about him and then finally met him about a year later and then started researching him and was really overwhelmed by the things that I saw and all that he did. We're thankful that Dr. Boyer is a part of our team, and just glad that she's here and making just a great contribution towards the history and making the history known of this church.
So this is a National Historic Site. It's on the
That is
registry, but is it also going to become something else in the future?
It is a National Historic Landmark. We are looking at being a World Heritage Site. We've been nominated for it. There's been 2 nominations, and we've been on both lists. So hopefully in the next several years, we will be a National Historic we'll be a World Heritage Site. And we will continue to invite people from across the world to come and see this place and hear the story about what happened here and about Reverend Shuttlesworth.
Now, do you still pastor in this particular building?
We do not pastor in this building. We vacated this building in 1997 and moved to the building up the street. We use this building primarily for historic tours. And then there are occasions we will have a program here with the Alabama Movement Choir or with some other organization that wants to come and observe the historicity of this building.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this, and we're excited for our students to learn more, especially about this being the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. So thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, indeed.
So this is extra special because we have some extra time to learn a little bit more about this place, and our amazing guests have decided to stay around with us a little bit. So we'll start with you, Reverend Wilder.
Okay.
I want to know more about this pastor that was here and why what did he do, and why do people still think about this place with such kind regards?
I think the first thing you need to know about him is that he was a man of faith. That's the most important thing. He was the type of person who actually believed that God was going to protect him, that God was leading him to do what he was doing, and that because he was doing God's will, that even if he died, even if something happened to him, that it was going to be for the betterment. So I think that's most important that people know. He was not just out trying to stir up trouble or just trying to get himself known. He was a man of faith. He believed this was what God was calling him to do. And so based on that, he could take some very bold steps. And when he came out of the first bomb unharmed, he knew then that God had saved him for the movement. And so for the most part, he was pretty much invincible. He was very bold. Some people thought his boldness took him a little bit too far, but when God saves you out of a bomb and you come out unscathed, then it increases your boldness a lot.
Absolutely.
Because of that boldness, he was able to stare evil in the face. He was strictly nonviolent. He did not believe in violence at all, but he was confrontational, and there's a difference.
There is.
He would confront evil on every hand, but he never raised his fist against anybody. Very, very seldom raised his voice, but he was a very fiery preacher.
So, did he have a family?
Yes, he had a wife and 4 children.
And did they live near here?
They lived right next to the church until the first building was bombed, and then they moved across the street. So he was very, very close to this building.
So, what was the time period that he was here at this church?
He was here from 1953 until 1961, but even when he left in 1961, he kept coming back and forth to lead the movement here in Birmingham, and he finally stopped around 1968.
So you talked about a bombing, and of course those are things that hurt our hearts that we think about, but they're important things to know and to grow from. So tell us about, there was a first bombing, so I'm assuming there was a second?
There was a first bombing in 1956, December 25th, 1956. There was a second bombing in 1958, in July of 1958, and there was a third bombing in December of 1962.
Was he part of any of the conversations that happened at the Gaston Hotel?
He was part and parcel of every conversation that happened at the Gaston Hotel. He was the one that invited Dr. King here to Birmingham. They would go down to the A.G. Gaston Motel to strategize in the war room. You see pictures of him and Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy down there. And so that was their meeting place from which they would launch out and go to Kelly Ingram Park and other places where they would demonstrate.
Talking about resilience, there definitely was resilience in Reverend Shuttlesworth. Can you tell me, after the first bombing, this happened on Christmas Eve, is that
Christmas
correct?
night.
And then what did he do the next day?
He had promised his congregation and the people who were following him that the day after Christmas, they would ride the bus in an integrated fashion. And so even though his home was bombed, he got up the next day, did exactly what he said he was going to do, even in borrowed clothes. He went down, he rode the bus in an integrated fashion, was arrested with several other people with him, but he carried out what he said he was going to do.
And I guess, like you said, after surviving that, he knew he was doing the right thing.
I think so. I liken it a lot to Daniel coming out of the lion's den. You know, when you come up out of a lion's den, there's not much else they can threaten you with.
Right. I love that this story continues, and that more people learn about this place that are just like us, coming in to visit. Now, you do some work with 4th graders and programming here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I certainly can. I thoroughly enjoy the 4th graders that come to historic Bethel Baptist Church, and they come to us really through the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument. So we get an opportunity to really talk about the idea of what's a hero, who is a hero? And then get kids to realize that that great football player, basketball player, or that amazing singer that they all love, you know, that those are great people, but are they really heroes? So we start the whole idea again to think outside of the box about that, and then to let them know that in this very community at this church, we've got heroes. We've got people who made a difference, not just for themselves, but in the lives of people from all over. Our goal here at Historic Bethel Baptist Church is to do 3 things. First, we want to engage all of our visitors. If I can get your attention in talking about heroes, something that young people love to talk about, then that's just one of the important things that we're trying to do. But then I need to educate you about what happened in this community and why what happened at this church changed not only Alabama, the United States, but it impacted the world. So we get young people to realize that just thinking your neighborhood right here in Birmingham is a place that changed the entire world. And I think we've got them. But beyond that, our goal is to empower young people to realize that they can and do make a difference. Our word today that we use a lot with our young people is next. You're next. What can you do? How can you stand up? How can you make a difference? I'm not trying to get them to be another Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, but I do want them to realize that they are important and that the things that they do every day can change the world.
I think that's such a good story for our students to hear and then to act upon. one of the things we do in our stories that we tell around the country is to connect them to UN global goals. And one of those goals is goal number 16, social justice, which has such a wide definition. But one of the basic definitions for us, for kids, is be a good human. Be kind to others. Think of others before yourself. I love the idea that you said he was not violent, but he was confrontational, and those are two different things.
Very true.
Yes.
I think it's okay for kids to stick up for themselves, for others that may not have their
Definitely.
voices heard. And if anything comes of our visit here, I hope that it does empower them to think about, in 50 years, will people say of them that they were a hero? Were they a difference maker?
I want you to realize what you just said about justice, that's our theme for young people. Not our theme, it's our concept. It's our big idea. And then if we can get them to wrap their minds around justice, but we get them to look at justice is not just fair. And when we talk about justice, we're thinking about corrective justice. We're thinking about procedural justice. How do you go about gathering information to make a difference? And then we talk about distributive justice. And when we do that, we use a really great activity to get kids to realize that they know when things are not fair. We pass out suckers. We pass out these super blow pops. It's just a few of the kids. And you should see their faces when they realize that somebody got a big, super blow pop and they just got a small sucker. And they start looking around and that's not fair. So we start talking about justice. If you've only got a few things to do or to pass out, how do you do that? How do I determine what's my process for deciding who gets the super blow pop? How do I distribute that? And from that point on, we've talked about heroes, and we've talked about justice, and I think from that they understand why this church is important and the importance of my hero, Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. One of the many reasons that I'm glad Dr. Boyer is here is that she's very good about making large concepts very practical, and the blow pops idea is a very, very practical idea that a lot of kids, you can see it on their faces, because I'm usually the one that passes out the blow pops. And when I get one a large sucker and one a small one, they're looking at me and wondering why am I discriminating against them? What's wrong with them that they can't get the bigger blow pop? And again, that's one of her many ideas that helps to bring this thing home. And that's what we want to do. We want people to understand. We're not just talking about what happened in the 1950s or even before that. We're talking about what happens today and how, for example, if you're rich and you do something wrong, it's embezzlement. But if you're poor and you steal, then you're a thief. And it can't be that. It has to be the same justice for everyone. And that's a lot of what was behind Reverend Shuttlesworth. He read the Bible. He saw that the same God loved us all equally. The same Christ died for us all. And so we should be treated the same under the law.
I love that. And I love the idea that we're working with kids to digest that in their own system. As adults, we're good. We do things okay, but it's the kids that are going to grow up and change this world. So they need to know all of the horrible stuff that happened, and out of those ashes, what has happened since then, and that it's not over, and that his mission's not over, and Dr. King's mission is not over. They have to continue to carry that torch. So I'm just thrilled to be here. Besides the fact that my dad's a pastor and I'm in this church today, I just feel a kindred spirit with both of you, that we are both, all three, people of faith. And we know that our kids can change the world. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Let me add one other thing, too.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I'm a little bit concerned that we think of it as Dr. King's dream or Reverend Shuttlesworth's mission. This is a bigger image than all of them. This is a universal thing that we should be seeking for, not just for Dr. King or Reverend Shuttlesworth or any other person. This is God's vision. This should be a human vision, that we live in a just society and that we practice justice, that we practice mercy. And so just so as not to get limited by that, this is a universal thing.
It is. And we want to make sure that kids understand that sometimes their voices aren't heard, right? But sometimes kids have voices that are heard. So how are they going to speak for those whose voices may not be heard. I'm thinking about classrooms, kids that you're in, and sometimes you may see kids that are being bullied.
Yes.
And maybe their voice is not being heard, or maybe you're at an advantage in your classroom where people listen to you. Well, don't just speak for yourself, though. Make sure that you're bringing your brothers and sisters in with you, and that we're working on this idea of equality and justice for all. Because until we have that, we're not going to have peace on earth. It has to be all of us joining hands and saying, I care for you just as much as I care for myself. I want you to come in closer because I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys and letting us be here today. So on behalf of these amazing humans, we're going to visit a couple of other places today, but be a good human.
Amen.